Okay, so hi everyone. I'm here today to talk about some patterns I found very useful in my last years of experience, especially with HTMX. This is a rerun from my DjangoCon Europe talk, but even if you listen to that one, I still have some new additional slides that can be useful. So first, a quick intro about myself. My name is Lucas, I'm from Portugal. I'm currently working at CheckSec, maintaining various Django's applications. I've been on the organization team of several Python and Django conferences along the years. I have more than 5 years of experience with Django and 3 years with HTMX. And I've also developed several applications for real estate, events, education markets, most of them with HTMX. So first of all, why did I embrace HTMX? 3 points, 3 key aspects. The simplicity. I've always worked with small teams. Everyone needs to account for the entire scope of the project. And even a simple SPA and JavaScript frameworks can bring a lot of complexity. Next, because I love Django. Django is an all batteries included framework. You have basically everything you need to build a complete application. And when you use an SPA framework, that means you're going to have to build that functionality from scratch or use tooling that is different, such as JavaScript libraries that you're not as familiar. So you're leaving the Django ecosystem, which is pretty good. Finally, productivity. HTMX allows me to iterate faster, to deliver features faster. I also don't need to interface with design applications such as Figma because I can do everything in the HTML. And you also avoid the communication bottleneck because you have a developer that handles both the presentation and the business layer. So first, let's see what does HTMX offer. In case you don't know, HTMX it's a JavaScript library that allows you to issue HTTP requests from any DOM element, and in the response, it expects HTML content that is swapped inside the DOM. So there are 2 ways of using HTMX. Mostly provides small UX and UI improvements to your existing multiple page app, or you can implement the look and feel of an SPA without needing any JavaScript or very little JavaScript. So that last approach is what we call HDAs, or Hypermedia driven applications. These applications focus on maintaining the state on the server. Your API will provide both the data and the operations at the same time, usually through hypertext, so HTML. Here we have a couple of contrast opinions about each advantages and disadvantages of these types of applications. So as you can see, SPAs handle the business state and the UI state at the same time. Usually the API only offers data, but I've seen JSON APIs that also have operations built in. With an Hypermedia application, the business logic is usually only on the server. The UI state is managed by HTML or Alpine.js and simple JavaScript libraries. And as I said, API provides data and operations through the hypertext. At the same time, SPAs are incredible for high interactivity, but require serialization, which in the Django realm means Django REST framework, serializers, etc. You need more boilerplate for simple features. If anyone has ever used React, the use effect, hell, and things like that. But at the same time, React comes and other frameworks with a high number of dependencies. While an HDA application usually does not require serialization, you have a direct approach for simple features, and you favor less dependencies, and even, for some people, a no-build approach. So first, let's look at each part of a Django application. So we'll start with views. A good pattern is to create views that work as on-demand entities, so parts of the UI that you can load just by adding a HTML tag. Several blog posts and other talks talk about this as lazy loading or trigger on load. Basically, you trigger a DOM element when it's rendered and replace that element with the result of the endpoint. So basically, you describe each endpoint as a single responsibility entity, and each one has its internal logic. The template is coupled with that logic, so you'll be rest assured that every place you put it on your application, the internal behavior will not break. So as you can see here, we have an example of a project list view. That project list view will contain just render a table and the filters and all the functionality needed there. It will not render the entire page. And that HTML block we see here, it's a section tag, can be duplicated along your app, and it will only return the projects. If you want to add filters, you can. But you have a single source of truth for every place on your application. So here's a very basic example of how it would look. What about if you need more complex UIs? So you can just follow a composition rule. You build each endpoint with its own responsibility and just deploy them as HTML tags. So in this case, we have a dashboard that has a project detail view. In this case, it's the latest for that customer. A list of other projects of the user, and the stats view, which in template format will look something like this. So if you want to move around things, if you want to change the layout, it's very easy. Just need to shift your HTML around. And this is a very also 30-minute demo build showing how it would look like. So next, in my opinion, the best views to be used with these types of application are class-based views. You have a lot of mixins provided by Django that give you a huge productivity boost. They remove a lot of boilerplate that you will find on most apps. You can also create your own generic mixins, and that's good for simplifying things like permission checking, context injection, those tasks that probably you're going to use alongside your app. You just create your own mixin and put it on the views that you require. Next is CRUD. CRUD is a set of basic operations that every application has. In Django, you have the create view, update view, delete view, but with HTMX, because you can issue any type of HTTP request, they work as DRF view sets. So you can have a single view that does all the operations and delegates each operation by the HTTP method. You can build it yourself just by composing the internal mixin from Django, or there are packages that also does that, such as Neapolitan. Next, let's move to the template layer. One of the limitations of Django templates is the lack of componentization. You can do that with include tags, but it's a bit verbose and not the best option. First, a quick intro about components and partials. Classify components as unitary, reusable, and self-contained elements or templates. So these are elements that you can use in multiple places. They should have low verbosity, simple, only one feature. Next, partials. Partials are usually composed sections, so lots of elements mixed together with a certain semantic value for your UI. We have examples here such as a buyer's list, a cart display, profile menu. And what about components on Django templates? There are a lot of solutions, so third-party packages for that. There's Cotton, Slippers, Ginjax, Django components. There's also the simple block tag for Django 5 users. But in my opinion, the best one right now is Django Cotton. It uses a markup similar to HTML, so it doesn't look weird inside your template. Allows you to use complex objects inside the components. You have support for multiple named slots, dynamic component inclusion, so if you need to evaluate something from the database to know which component to render, it also supports that feature. And as you can see here, a simple example, we have a product item component. In the left side, you can see how the component is structured. You can style it, lay out it as you want. You can even use like conditionals. And in the right side, you have the way you're going to put it in your template. So it's just like an HTML tag. You pass the variables if you want different slots, and it's a little more user-friendly than include tags on Django templates. So now that we have a solution for the components, we need a structure. And a well-maintained structure helps you maintain UI consistency, standardizes styling choices, and maximizes reusability, which is one of the standards for Django. A good way to do that is to have a two-layered component structure. So here we have abstract components and concrete or specific components. Usually abstract components can be extendable skeletons, just simple layouts that aren't specific or aren't usable as is. Tables, badges, menus, toasts. And the concrete component is when you apply an abstract component to a data model, for example. You can create it as is, or you can use an abstract component and fill the slots with a specific use case. Product table, status badge, error toast, header menu, for example. And if you have a good set of abstract components, you're basically building a design system. So here's an example of an abstract table. This is a simple template, just a table with some styling. And here we have a concrete component. So as you can see, it inherits from the base template, the base table template. We fill in with the data model project specificities, such as actions and values. And this is the final result, a very simple design. So next, if you already use HTMX, this will be a set of tips and ways of improving the usage. First, let's start with the closest keyword. This is a keyword that is very useful if you need to do targets relative to other elements. For example, if you have a row in a table that you need to reload the table, you could target using the table ID or a class from the table. But using the closest element, you'll always know that the item is inside the table. The closest keyword is less error prone, so it's easier for maintainability. It breaks less often and avoids using complex naming. Next is provide feedback to the user. So always use the Ajax indicator that while a request is in flight shows a spinner or a transition. You should always override the HTMX response error event with a simple toast or modal to display an error message. The View Transitions API is something a bit recent, but it's also useful because it's a toggle on-off feature, and you'll have instant page transitions in your application. And you should disable elements that the user already has triggered, or cancel requests when another is in flight, so you don't have issues with double-clicking and issuing two requests at the same time. Next is the tooling. There's a lot of tooling being built to improve HTMX usage. Django HTMX is a good package to allow you to reference some HTMX quirks inside Django. As I stated before, using component packages is also very useful for templates. And a small library, JS library, I don't think it's a very bad usage for simple UI visibility toggles, unless you have a component library that does that for you. Next is security. When you're embedding HTML or any other values from the database, you should always use the escape.js template filter to avoid breaking the HTML and the Alpine statements if you're using Alpine. If you're manipulating JSON, which is rare but can happen, you should always deserialize it inside the template, inside an Alpine statement, and not send it deserialized from the context. And if you're using HTML generated by the user, always use a sanitization package to ensure that the user doesn't add any HTMX attributes that you don't need. Next, requesting partials of full pages. When the user reloads a page, you don't want it to reload just a partial, so you need to take care of that. There are packages such as Django template partials that allow you to do that. I think there's also, next version of Django, there's an idea to get this package inside the core. You can always create an empty base template that includes all the head of the HTML with all the bundles, so it loads without any issues. This is a quick snippet of how it would look like. If you are using the history push functionality, you should ensure that all the URLs you push to the history always deliver full pages when requested by the browser. And to avoid errors with caching, there's also something that is mentioned in several documentations, but can be often forgotten, is to set the very header to AJAX requests to avoid the browser caching partials and displaying the wrong pages. Next, when you have related elements inside partials, so let's say you have a partial that has a confirm modal or a search box that shows the dropdown. Some people like using the HTMX all the way, so loading it as a user-triggered event. In my opinion, if you have static data, you should just include it inside the partial and toggle it using JavaScript or HTML. If you have dynamic data, load it independently. For example, search input, if you need to show a dropdown with values from the database, wait for the user to search it to display it. Next, on complex UIs, you have a lot of different states. Because the state is managed on the server, it can be a bit tricky to manage multiple partials. So these are some tips of how to approach this when you get to that point. So here we have a simple example. We have 3 partials that are provided by 3 different endpoints. We have a form that allows you to edit products, a list on the left side. As soon as you edit the product name, on the left side you'll see that if it swaps only the form, the left side will have stale state because the name of the product hasn't updated. How can we deal with it? The most basic approach is to extend the swap area, so you'll swap both the form and the list. That's useful if you have a way to lazy load other partials, if the partials are related, if it makes sense to join them, and if they have simple dependencies. What you should not do is to add an edge case or some condition to your view so that it displays that use case, that template partial on specific edge cases. So try to maintain single responsibility for each endpoint. Next is to use out-of-band swaps. Out-of-band swaps are a feature that HTMX provides that allows you to take the response and send parts of it to different parts of the UI. This is useful when you have simple dependencies and other partials are not related, so very different things. This is a great feature to use. Finally, the last approach is to dispatch an event to related partials. So if you have a lot of complex dependencies, a lot of partials that needs to be updated, you can use an event management solution, tell each partial to reload from the server, but it's a very tricky solution because, of course, it needs event management. Next is a chapter on how to improve HTML usage. So here we're trying to improve not only the templates, but also how do you implement certain features. So first is the usage of semantic HTML tags. Section, main, aside. These are very useful because you don't need to add complex IDs and complex naming. You can just target those specific parts of your UI, which are common. Use elements such as dialog, details, input type search, and input type color instead of third-party JavaScript libraries. Those are native, those are supported. It's always better to use anything than to introduce another dependency. The same thing for web APIs, like drag and drop. You can easily, just with HTMX, do a drag and drop interface without any JavaScript. And you can also use the dataset property and the data attributes to store the static data. If your application has the need for some client-side interactivity, my opinion is to avoid inline scripting because it gives a lot of problems, especially when you reload partials multiple times. Use libraries such as Alpine and Hyperscript. If you're using third-party JavaScript libraries, you can easily create a wrapper that is created in a different file. You just call it declaratively. Your template becomes a lot more clean, a lot more easy to maintain. And if you have a necessity for really high interactivity, you should try to use proper tooling for it. So in this case, take your favorite SPA frameworks such as React, Svelte, Angular, and build a web component that you can just add to your template. So the idea here is, if you look at this picture, if your application fits well this architecture, you should have a lot of low interactivity built with Alpine.js statements or HyperScript, medium usages for custom directives, and very few usages for web components. So if your application doesn't fit this scale, let's call it, maybe it's better to avoid and use an SPA. This also helps with striking a balance for locality of behavior and separation of concerns. Try to reduce the template verbosity. So easy interactivity should be there, complex interactivity should be on its own file. And as stated before, high reactivity, just use proper tooling, use React, use Svelte, and export it as a web component. So after all this, is HTMX a good fit for your application? Probably yes. Especially even more if you have a CRUD-heavy application, you don't need a lot of business logic on the client side. There's not a lot of DOM manipulation. However, if you need real-time collaboration, a lot of JavaScript libraries, offline functionality, or heavy client-side state, maybe you're better with an SPA. However, you can always use the hybrid approach. You can build parts of your app using front-end frameworks that builds what we can call islands. That's similar to the front-end realm of front-end islands or micro front-ends. You can have certain sections that load from a web component, and you can communicate with them via HTML or a regular JSON or REST API. Next is just some small, quick resources for learning if you're entering the HTMX world or you're more interested now. This is the de facto book for HTMX. It's a very light read, even if you don't like books. The letters are too big, and the book has very few pages. It gives a lot of theoretical and practical concepts and helps with the mental model, because you'll need to change your mental model after developing front-end applications. There's also this repository. It works not only for Django, but for Flask and FastAPI. It has a lot of topics such as templating, architecture, libraries, snippets, and has a lot of examples. And finally, there's also the HTML first website. This is a website that has good resources on following the rule of, if you can build it with HTML, build it. If not, CSS. If not, JavaScript. It has a lot of examples. It has a good set of libraries, developers that you can follow that follow this paradigm, and other resources. Finally, we can look at what Hypermedia and HTMX-like development can bring. There's also other solutions for that, Django Unicorn, Datastar, and Poly, that work similarly, but each one has its own purpose. There's also a new feature called Ajax Preserve, allows you to move complex elements without losing state. So for example, if you want to drag a YouTube video on a page, you can move it without any issue. The video will still playing, but it requires I think it's only compatible with Chrome and the latest versions. Finally, and the most important thing of this talk, stability as a feature. HTMX is built for your pages and web applications to work for 5, 10, 15 years. So there's not going to be breaking changes, syntax changes. Everything with HTMX will be stable from now on, just security updates. And this is some quotes from Carson Gross, the creator, that I think are good to understand, and especially for junior developers that are very quick and want to learn everything. A good set of mindset. And thank you all. That's everything for today. And have a great EuroPython.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect timing, I would say. We have 5 minutes for Q&A session, and I'm sure there are many of you who might have asked questions for Lucas. So please line up at the microphone. Don't be shy. Nothing here. Okay, you have a question? I come to you quickly. And others, please come to the microphone.
Thank you for the talk. I think you already touched on this with the when to use like SPA framework or when to use HTMX. But I want to ask you personally if you found like when you began developing the application with Django and HTMX, and then the requirements keep on getting more complicated on the client side, did you hit some roadblock where you say, oh, like this is probably not the best use case anymore, I wish I started this as a React app, something along those lines?
At this point, I think I have already an understanding on the limitations. And that's something that everyone should learn with experimenting. But like I said, usually we identify the crucial parts of the application where we know, okay, this might need an SPA framework here. You can have a wizard that has a complex step where there's a lot of drag and drop and you need to store things on the browser. Okay, we'll build this section just with React or Svelte or Angular, and it still gives us a productivity boost to the building everything with those frameworks. Yeah.
Right, the microphone, please.
Hello, my name is Igor. Will this code pass WC3 validator?
Sorry?
Will HTMX attributes pass W3C validator?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure, but I know that HTMX way is a bit recent, although it's old-fashioned technology. I think there's a standard right now, or at least a paper, trying to put most of the features in the inline HTML standard. And I guess that when we have those features, it will pass and we won't need any JavaScript libraries.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the talk. We are a Django shop at my company, but we've been looking at HTMX with curiosity. I was just wondering if you have any tips on trying to integrate HTMX into an already existing Django project. We use Django REST framework with a React frontend. And we've been looking at maybe replacing some of our forms with HTMX, but I don't know if you have had an experience trying to bring on this simpler technology to an already existing project.
I've had experience with rewriting it from scratch, from React, and that was a very good experience. I would say divide and conquer. So first because like you can mix and match, there's no issue. You can export React components as web components, and you can probably start with simpler pages, the ones that depend more on the server, and keep the rest, go endpoint by endpoint and remove them, and it shouldn't be a problem to use both at the same time.
Thank you.
Right, yeah, we would have maybe 1 minute left for a quick question. If there was something, please excuse the microphone. We put it out over there because here in the middle aisle it will be in the way for the camera. Is there anything? Nothing. All right. Well, we had a few questions here. Well, let's thank the speaker again.